So we're going to continue with fractions, but today we're going to add and subtract fractions. Yesterday we multiplied and divided fractions. That's pretty easy. But before we do that, we're going to review a little by knowing when we're multiplying or when we're adding or subtracting, okay? So I'm going to pause it right now, and I'm going to have you guys come up and write the answers randomly. So here we go. We'll have the answers in a couple of seconds. So the key is to think on which one of these am I thinking of money, and on which one of these am I multiplying and thinking the rules or thinking of the rules of multiplication. So obviously we're thinking of money wherever there's a sign between your terms. Like number 2, we're thinking of money. Why is that? Because there's a minus sign between the terms. Anytime there's a sign between your terms, you're thinking of money. So number 6, you're thinking of money. Number 7, money. 8, money. 9, money, right? So when you do think of money, a negative means that you owe, and also a minus sign means that you owe. So if you owe 4 and you owe 2, you're going to owe 6. Now right here, you're not thinking of money because there's no sign between your terms. And in the future, very near future, when we deal with variable expressions, if I ask you what 3x actually means, that really means 3 times x, right? So in the future, when I say 3x, what does that actually mean? There is no sign between it, so that really means 3 times x. So it goes to say that when there's no signs between your terms, you're multiplying. So number 4, you're multiplying. Number 5, you're multiplying. Number 1, you're multiplying. And of course, the rules to multiplication, if the signs are the same, they're both negative, then your answer is positive. If the signs are different, then your answer is negative, okay? I can't stress how important this is. If you don't know these rules, there's no way that you're going to be able to pass Algebra 1. So let's get them down if we haven't gotten them down already. Right here, we're thinking of money. You owe $3. You have $2. You're still going to owe $1. Over here, you owe 5, but you have 3. Think about that. If you owe somebody $5 and you have $3, you could give them the $3, but you're still going to owe them $2. So negative 5 plus 3 is equal to negative 2. And then we have a minus minus that needs to change to plus plus before we even think of money. So what we have down here is really a plus 2. So what we have is you owe somebody $2, you have $2, you're not going to have anything left over. That's your answer, 0. That was just a review. I hope we get it. We still need to continue reviewing. Let's check out this review of fractions, multiplying fractions. And I also threw in exponents. It's kind of like 2 concepts in one. We should know how to multiply fractions. It's really easy. Please jot these down. You should know that multiplying fractions is really easy. How do you do it? Anybody? Top with the top. What's 2 times 5? 10. Bottom with the bottom. 3 times 7. 21. And that's your answer. Try to reduce it. We can't reduce it. So that's it. That's your answer. When I say try to reduce it, the easiest thing to do is to ask yourself, are they both divisible by 2? No, they're not. Are they both divisible by 3? No, they're not. So they're reduced. That's your answer, 10 over 21, okay? Now, we also learned yesterday about exponents, and that little number 2, the power, the exponent, tells you how many times to multiply the base with itself. So what you could do is rewrite 5/7 squared, rewrite it in expanded form, which would be 5/7 times 5/7 2 times, right? And that is exactly like number 1. Just multiply the top with the top and you'll get 25. Bottom with the bottom, you'll get 49. And you try to reduce, but you can't. So that is your answer for number 2. The answer is 25 over 49. Number 3 is interesting. I'm going to, rewrite it. I'm going to expand it. And that will be a negative 2/3 times a negative 2/3 times a negative 2/3. That's what that little power of 3 actually means, to write the base with itself, multiply the base with itself 3 times. So first off, is my answer going to be positive or is it going to be negative? It's going to be negative because we know that the first 2, a negative times a negative is a positive, but they pair up, it's positive, and there's an extra negative. So we know our answers are going to be negative. So I don't really have to worry about positives or negatives anymore. I know my answer is going to be negative. Now all I have to do is multiply these fractions, which is really easy. Multiply the top with the top with the top. So what is 2 times 2? Times 2. 8. So we already know 8 up on top. We already put the negative out here in the front, so we're good. How about on the bottom? We have 3 times 3, 9 times 3, 27. So our answer is negative 8 over 27. Of course, it would be nice if we could reduce it, but we can't, right? We try to reduce by 2. You can't divide both by 2. You can't divide both by 3, so that is reduced. Moving on to number 4. How do we divide by fractions? Yep, change the division into multiplication, and yes, we flip that second fraction. So instead of a negative 1/6, it's going to be a negative 6 over 1. The first fraction is going to stay negative 3 over 4. Okay. So now that we have multiplication, we should know that a negative times a negative equals a positive. That's right. And we could just multiply, then reduce, or we could reduce first, then multiply. Totally up to you. What do you want to do? Reduce first? Okay, so I know I can't reduce 3/4, but I could reduce the 6 over 4. I could reduce by what? By 2. So if I say 6 divided by 2 is 3, and 4 divided by 2 is 2, I now have reduced my values. And now I could multiply top with the top. I end up with a positive 9, because a negative times a negative is a positive. 3 times 3 is 9. And on the bottom, 2 times 1 is 2. And that is your answer, 9/2. Of course, if you wanted to write it as an improper fraction, I mean, that is an improper fraction. If you wanted to write it as a mixed number, you would divide 9 by 2. It'll go in 4 times. 2 times 4 is 8. You'll have a remainder of 1. And the way to write your answer is to always write your 4 and then the remainder over the original divisor. So 4.5. So 9/2 is really 4 1/2. Half of $9 is $4.50. Anyway, this is all stuff that we should already know how to do. Let's move on to something that's more interesting. How about adding and subtracting fractions? But before adding and subtracting fractions, it'd be a good idea to go back and compare fractions. You guys remember where we had a greater than symbol or a less than symbol? Do we remember how to compare these fractions? Yeah, visually is one, which is great sometimes. Most of the time, visually is not the best, but it's good to understand visually. What other methods did we have? Okay, converting them to decimals. Yeah, 2 divided by 3 will be a decimal. 4 divided by 7 will be a decimal. And you could compare decimals. And there's a third way, the best way, which is to find the common denominator, to make the denominators be common. Okay, so right here, first of all, jot this down in your notebooks: 2/3 and 4/7, and put comparing. Okay, we need the denominators to be the same in order for us to compare them. Okay, so it's kind of like if I said, what's bigger, 1/2 of a pizza or 2/4 of a pizza? Well, those are the same, right? But in order for you to compare them, you would like to get a common denominator right here. So how do you get a common denominator? You go to the bigger denominator, which is 4, and you think, could I change the smaller one to become the bigger one? The answer is yes. So the common denominator would be 4 in this case, and you would say 2 times what will get me a 4? Well, 2 times 2 will get me a 4, and what I do to the bottom, I must do to the top, so you end up with 2/4. And the other one, what do you do to the 4 to change it to a 4? It's already a 4. You don't have to do anything to it. So you don't have to do anything to the 2. I mean, yeah, you can multiply by 1. That's fine, but it's going to stay. And now you could clearly see when you have a common denominator of 4 that the numerators are the same, so they are equal in that case. So the idea, whenever we compare fractions, the idea is that we want these numbers to be the same. Okay, we want the numbers to be the same. Now, sometimes you will be able to change the smaller one to become the bigger one. But right here, like, could I 3 times something? Would that give me 7? No, it doesn't work. So the next thing to do would be to take your bigger one and double it, which would be 14. Could I change 3 to become 14? No. So triple it. 3 times 7? 21. Could I change 3 to become 21? Yes. So right here, the common denominator is 21. So everybody please jot down 21 and 21. And we're going to change this 3 to become 21, and we're going to change this 7 to become 21. How do you change 3 to become 21? Multiply by 7, multiply by 7. What you do to the bottom, you must do to the top, and that'll be a 14 over 21. How do you change 7 to become 21? Multiply by 3, we end up with a 12 over here. And now you could clearly see that 14 is bigger than 12. So comparing fractions, you need a greater than sign between those two, which means that the original 2/3 is greater than 4/7. Once again, this is review. How do you compare fractions? The best way is to change both denominators to become that lowest common denominator of the two. Do we understand that? Okay, that's essential on what we're doing today, adding and subtracting. To add or subtract fractions, you need a common denominator. Okay, so you need to understand that process of looking at your two denominators and coming up with one common denominator. Okay, so how do we add or subtract fractions? Well, one, you got to get a common denominator. So what's a common denominator of 3 and 7? 21. So everybody write down 21, 21. And once again, how do you change 3 to become 21? Multiply by 7, you get a 14 right here. How do you change 7 to become 21? Multiply by 3, you get a 12 up here. And we do have a minus sign between the two fractions. So we have a minus sign. So once you get that common denominator, you could add or subtract the numerators, the top numbers. 14 take away 12. What's 14 take away 12? 2. And it is over that common denominator 21. That's what it says right here. Write the answer over the common denominator and reduce if possible. So 14 take away 12 is 2. Put it over the common denominator 21. It doesn't change. And you can't reduce that, which means that that is your final answer right there. Cool. Now, this might be a little confusing to some of us. It might be a little easier if we think of it in a real world situation. Let's say I had 1/2 of a pizza, right? A half of a pizza. And let's say I wanted to take away 1 slice of a pizza where the original slice, the original entire pizza was sliced into 12 pieces. So let's say 1/2 take away 1/12. All right, so I have half a pizza. I take away 1 slice from that half. How much am I going to have left? Well, in order to subtract these two fractions, I need a common denominator. What is my common denominator in 2 and 12? 12, absolutely. Always look at your bigger one and ask, could I change the smaller one to become that bigger one? If you can, then it's ready to go, right? So let's change this 2 to become 12. How? By multiplying by 6. And we do to the bottom, we do to the top. That's how we're going to get a common denominator of 12. Now, the other one, this guy is already 12, so I don't have to do anything to the 12. I don't have to do anything to the 1. And I am subtracting. Over here, 2 times 6 gave us a 12, so 1 times 6 gives us 6. And now that we have a common denominator, I could actually do 6 take away 1, which is 5, over that common denominator 12. And you can't reduce it, so there's your answer. What do you think? Yeah? Do you want to see another? No? Okay, we're going to do one anyway. Let's try another. Give me any fraction you want. Any fraction. 16 over 32. Okay. 16 over 32. And I'm going to say take away, how about 7 over 8? There's a good one. Okay. So I need a common denominator to be able to add or subtract fractions. I need these guys to be the same value. Any ideas? Okay, so what would my common denominator be? 32. And that's exactly right, by multiplying the 8 by 4. So my advice to you is to go to the bigger one and see if you could change the smaller one to become the bigger one. And in this case, it's true. Yeah, 8 times 4 is 32. So we know that the common denominator will be 32. Now, let's say this wouldn't have worked. Then I would have taken that and I would have doubled it to 64 and then asked if 8 could become 64 and so on and so on, right? But right here, 32 is the common denominator. How do I change this 32 to become 32? It's already 32, so I don't mess with it. I don't have to mess with the 16. It stays. How do I change, how do I change 8 to become 32? You guys said multiply by 4. So multiply by 4, and 7 times 4 is 28. And of course, we have a minus sign. And once you have a common denominator, you could either add or subtract the numerators according to your sign. And in this case, we're subtracting. You have 16, but you owe 28. If you have 16 and you owe 28, how do you end up? Negative 12, right? If you have 16, you owe 28, you can't completely pay them off. You could give them the 16, but you're still going to owe 12. And it is over that common denominator 32. That's our answer. But could we reduce it? The answer is yes. Again, always try to at least cut them in half, right? Could you do half of 12 and half of 32? Yeah, you could. Of course, you could try something bigger, but let's just go with half right now. Negative 6 over half of 32 is what? 16? And we can do half again, right? So negative 3 over 8. And that's your final answer for that original question. Now, yes, we could have right from here said, I want to reduce by 4. 12 divided by 4 is 3. 32 divided by 4 is 8. Negative 3/8 is your answer. Sound good? Okay, so the goal for today's lesson is to be able to add or subtract fractions. And the way to do that is to get a common denominator. One more, and that's it, all right? Let's say if I had 1/6 take away 1/8. 1/6 take away 1/8. I need to subtract these two. So I think you guys could appreciate multiplication, right? Multiplying fractions is easy. It's a lot harder to add or subtract fractions. We need a common denominator. What's our common denominator going to be right here? 24, right? Now, yes, we could have said that the common denominator is 48. We could have actually multiplied these together and said, oh, 48 is going to be our common denominator. But the strategy that you should do is go to the bigger one, which is 8, and ask yourself, could I change 6 to become 8? The answer is no. 6 times 2 is not 8. And then take 8 and double it. What's 8 doubled? What's 8 times 2? 16, right? Could you change 6 to become 16? No, it doesn't work. How about 8 times 3? What's that? 24. Could you change 6 to become 24? Yes. So that's how you know that your lowest common denominator is 24. And then show your work. How do you change 6 to become 24? Times 4. And what you do to the bottom, you do to the top. So up on top, 4 times 1 is 4. Over here, how do you change 8 to become 24? Multiply by 3. Bless you. And you end up with the 3 up here. And we are subtracting. So what's our final answer going to be? 1 over 24. Can't reduce. We're done. So with that said, we should have the skills to do today's homework assignment. If I were you, since we most recently learned how to add and subtract fractions, that's what I would start with. It's ridiculously easy when you're adding and subtracting fractions with the common denominator, right? I mean, how about this, real world? What is 1/2 of a pizza plus another half of a pizza? You have one whole pizza. But what does that mean? You have a common denominator, 2 and 2, so you're able to add 1 plus 1. That'll be 2, and you put it over the common denominator, 2 over 2, which is equal to 1 whole pizza, right? Okay, anyway, I would start with adding and subtracting fractions. What would the common denominator there be? You'd have to change them to what? To 4. The common denominator is 4. How about right here? What would the common denominator be? 10. All right. How about here? What would the common denominator be? 6. All right, cool. How about this? Let's do one of these. Let's do number 8, because we have a mixed fraction that's being added to a regular fraction. So I recommend, and there's other ways of doing it, but I recommend changing your mixed fraction to an improper fraction. And the way to do that is to take your denominator 3 and multiply it by 2. So 3 times 2 is 6. And then 6 plus that number 2 would give you 8. And you put that 8 over 3. 8 over 3. So 2 2/3 is really the same as 8/3. That's back from the 6th grade. Hopefully we remember how to change a mixed fraction to an improper. Are you with me? Okay, now the other fraction, it says plus 1/2. Okay, so we need to add these two fractions, and we know that in order to add fractions, we need a common denominator. What's the common denominator going to be? 6. So we're going to have a 6 right here and a 6 over here. How do you change this 3 to become 6? times 2. So put a times 2 there and a times 2 up there, which gives us 16 up on the numerator. How do we change 2 to become 6? Times 3, right? So times 3 here, times 3 up there, it gives us a 3. We do have a plus sign between the two. So what's our answer going to be? 19 over common denominator stays 6. Now, that's your answer. But let's say you're taking a multiple choice test on Friday and that answer is not there. It might be written as a mixed number instead of improper fraction. Simply divide 19 divided by 6. That's what it says, 19 divided by 6. 6 times what goes into 19 without going over? 3. Okay, and that'll give us 18. And when we subtract, we'll have a remainder of 1. Now, if I wanted to change it to a decimal, that's where I would add a decimal and a 0, drop a 0, and continue. But I want a mixed fraction, which is always the answer 3 with the remainder over the original divisor. So 3 and 1 over 6. So 3 and 1/6 could also be the answer. 3 and 1/6. Both answers are correct. Anyway, I want you guys to work on the rest of these and then go back and review adding and subtracting integers. By the way, we don't have to do number 13 or 14. We're skipping over the absolute values for now. But on these, we're thinking of money. Down here, we're multiplying with the rules. If the signs are the same, the answer is positive. If the signs are different, the answer is negative. That's what we're multiplying or dividing. We're even multiplying and dividing fractions. We even have exponents, some with parentheses, some without parentheses, which do make a difference. And we also have these over here, multiplying and dividing fractions. Okay, so we're going to work on this for the rest of class. And if you wanted to, you could go to Google Classroom and check your solutions right there. They're posted. So that's about it for today. That's all we need to learn for the actual test, Unit 0. So we have a test on Friday, and you already have a practice test available to you on Google Classroom if you wanted to start studying for it already.